Letzte Woche ist die Ampelkoalition in Berlin geplatzt. Und ich beschäftige mich eigentlich mit KI und weniger mit Politik. Manchmal regt mich die Politik auch auf, ganz ehrlich. Aber ich finde, wir könnten alle etwas mehr Fakten, etwas mehr Sachverstand selber einsetzen und vielleicht einfach mal über konkrete Vorschläge nachdenken und nicht nur meckern. Weil das fällt mir auf bei den sozialen Netzwerken, dass extrem viel nur gemeckert wird und nicht über konkrete Vorschläge diskutiert wird. Und ich möchte es eine Mischung machen. Und zwar hatte ich das Papier von Christian Lindner, nämlich dieses Wirtschaftspapier, mal der KI gegeben, NotebookLM. Und diese KI macht ja aus einem Papier einen Podcast. Und das gibt es leider nur auf Englisch, diese Anwendung. Aber ich möchte euch einfach mal anregen, hört es euch mal an. Mir geht es zum einen darum, wenn ich das jetzt mache, A, kann man mal über die Fakten, über die Fragen, über die Vorschläge diskutieren. Und B, kann man auch mal sich anhören, wie gut die KIs inzwischen schon die Papiere zusammenfassen. Das heißt, das gibt es jetzt. Ich wünsche euch viel Spaß damit. Wenn ihr vielleicht auch Meinungen dazu habt, sollte ich vielleicht politischer werden, wünscht ihr euch vielleicht mehr Diskussion in Deutschland, dann schreibt es gerne mal in die Kommentare. Wenn nicht, ist auch völlig in Ordnung. Ich wünsche euch viel Spaß mit dem Papier, und zwar dem Podcast, den automatisch generierten KI-Podcast von NotebookLM aus dem Papier von Christian Lindner. Ich finde es nämlich cool, wie sehr die KI dies augenscheinlich schon versteht und darüber sogar über die Fakten diskutiert. Ich finde es recht unterhaltsam. Viel Spaß damit.
Hey there, welcome back. Today, we're going deep into the German economy. Not just any part of it, we're going straight to the source. A document from Germany's Federal Minister of Finance, Christian Lindner.
It's titled Wirtschaftswende Deutschland Konzept für Wachstum und Generationengerechtigkeit, which translates to Economic Turnaround Germany Concept for Growth and Intergenerational Justice.
Wow, that's quite a mouthful. Honestly, the title's a bit misleading. This isn't just some dry policy paper. It's more like Lindner's personal manifesto for how he thinks Germany should tackle its economic challenges. And let me tell you, some of his proposals are pretty radical.
It's definitely a fascinating read, packed with strong opinions and ideas that have been stirring up quite a bit of controversy.
So today, we're going to unpack all of that for you. We'll dig into Lindner's arguments, explore why they're causing such a stir, and try to understand what his economic turnaround could mean for Germany and its role in the global economy. By the end of this deep dive, you'll have a clear understanding of the economic crossroads Germany is facing, and Lindner's vision for navigating it.
Lindner starts by acknowledging Germany's economic strengths, its innovative industries, skilled workforce, strong middle class. It's easy to see why Germany is considered an economic powerhouse.
Right. But then he kind of pulls the rug out from under us. He says Germany's recent economic forecasts are pretty bleak, and he doesn't think it's just a temporary dip. He's arguing that there are deep-rooted structural problems holding Germany back.
And to understand his proposed solutions, we need to understand the problems as he sees them. He highlights 5 key issues that he believes are dragging down Germany's growth.
Okay, so problem number 1, low productivity growth. He blames what he calls a proliferating thicket of regulations and bureaucracy. It sounds like he's saying that all the red tape is choking the life out of innovation and making it hard for businesses to thrive.
That's exactly his argument. He believes that excessive regulation is stifling entrepreneurship and preventing German companies from reaching their full potential.
Okay, I get it. Too much of bureaucracy can definitely slow things down. What's the next problem on his list?
The second issue he identifies is low labor volume. Germany's population is aging, and working hours per employee are relatively low compared to other developed countries.
So basically, there are fewer people working, and they're working fewer hours. What does Lindner think is driving that?
Well, he points to weakened work incentives as a contributing factor, suggesting that the social safety net, while important, might be disincentivizing work in some cases. He doesn't go into detail in the document, but it's a controversial suggestion for sure.
It is. It's a touchy subject, but it makes you think about the balance between providing support and encouraging people to work. Okay, what's next?
This is where it gets interesting. Lindner takes aim at Germany's unique path on climate protection. You see, Germany decided to go solo on phasing out nuclear power and aiming for climate neutrality by 2045, which is 15 years ahead of the EU target.
Wow, that's ambitious. Isn't that a good thing? Why would he see that as a problem?
Well, Lindner argues that going green too fast is actually hurting the economy in the short term. He says it's leading to skyrocketing energy cost, premature write-offs of productive assets, and a lot of economic uncertainty for businesses.
So he's basically saying there's a price to pay for being a green pioneer.
Exactly. And he thinks Germany might be paying too high a price, especially since it's going it alone on some of these policies.
Oh, okay. I can see how that could be a tough balancing act. What's the next issue on his list?
The fourth problem he identifies is a high investment backlog. He claims that despite favorable economic conditions over the past decade, Germany missed opportunities to invest in crucial areas like infrastructure, digitalization, and even defense.
So he's saying Germany didn't spend its money wisely?
Essentially, yes. He argues that instead of making these much-needed investments, the focus was on expanding the welfare state. So while social spending is important, he believed that Germany missed a chance to invest in its future.
It sounds like he's building a case for shrinking the role of government in the economy and shifting priorities.
You're picking up on a key theme here, and his final point really drives it home. He highlights the fragmentation of the global economy as a major threat. With geopolitical shifts and rising protectionism, Germany's export-oriented economy is taking a hit.
That makes sense. A lot of Germany's success has been built on selling goods to other countries. If those markets become less reliable, it's going to have an impact.
Exactly. And Lindner argues that in this increasingly volatile global landscape, Germany needs to become more competitive and less reliant on external factors. He's suggesting that the old model might not work as well in the future.
Okay, so he's laid out these 5 big challenges, but what are the real-world consequences? How do these structural weaknesses actually affect everyday people and Germany's overall economic standing?
That's a great question, and it leads us to the next point Lindner addresses, the fiscal squeeze. He argues that slower economic growth means less tax revenue for the government. And if government spending keeps rising at the same time, it puts a huge strain on public finances.
It's like a household budget. If you're not bringing in as much money, but your expenses keep going up, you're going to run into trouble.
Precisely. And this is where Germany's debt brake comes into play. It's a rule written into the German constitution that limits how much money the government can borrow.
Okay, I've heard of that. But honestly, I'm a bit fuzzy on the details. Can you break it down for me?
Sure. The debt brake is essentially a way to ensure that the government doesn't rack up huge debts that future generations will have to pay off. It limits the structural deficit, which is the difference between government revenue and spending, excluding any one-off or cyclical factors. This means the government has to keep its spending in check, even when times are tough.
So it's kind of like a safety net to prevent irresponsible spending.
Exactly. And Lindner is a big fan of the debt brake. He sees it as crucial for intergenerational fairness. He doesn't want today's spending to burden our children and grandchildren with mountains of debt.
I can respect that. But isn't there a risk that being too strict with spending could actually hurt the economy? If the government can't invest in things like infrastructure or education, wouldn't that slow down growth even more?
That's a valid concern. And it's a debate that's playing out in Germany right now. If economic growth doesn't pick up,
Yeah.
the debt brake could actually force the government to make even deeper spending cuts in the coming years.
So it's a bit of a tightrope walk, isn't it? Trying to find the right balance between fiscal responsibility and investing in the future.
Absolutely. And it's made even more complicated by the fact that Germany also has to adhere to new European fiscal rules. It's not just a domestic issue anymore.
Okay, so tell me more about these European rules. How do they affect Germany's ability to spend its way out of trouble?
These rules, set at the EU level, are also designed to ensure long-term fiscal sustainability across the Eurozone. They put limits on government spending, taking into account factors like economic growth, aging populations, and interest rates. They're meant to prevent countries from getting into too much debt.
So even if Germany wanted to spend more to stimulate the economy, these European rules might tie their hands.
Exactly. And Lindner argues that these rules leave very little room for maneuver, even for popular ideas like creating new special funds for specific projects.
So no magic bullet or easy way out. Germany is facing some tough constraints, both domestically and within the EU, but we still haven't gotten to the solutions yet. How does Lindner propose to revive the German economy with all these limitations?
Well, that's where we get into the heart of his Wirtschaftspapier concept. He lays out 2 competing visions for Germany's economic future.
Okay, let's hear it. What are his options?
He calls the first approach vertical industrial policy, and he's not a fan. This is where the government picks and chooses which industries and technologies to support, using targeted subsidies and regulations.
So it's a very hands-on approach, with the government essentially picking winners and losers.
Exactly. And Lindner argues that this approach is inefficient and prone to picking the wrong winners. He believes it stifles competition and ultimately hurts innovation. He basically thinks bureaucrats aren't the best people to be making strategic decisions about the future of the economy.
Okay, so what's his alternative? What does he think is the better way?
He calls his preferred approach a market-based, technology-neutral supply-side policy. It sounds complicated, but it's really about creating a business environment that encourages companies to invest and grow without the government playing favorites.
So less government intervention, more free market competition.
Exactly. He wants to see lower taxes, fewer regulations,
Right.
and strong incentives for investment. He believes that by leveling the playing field and letting the market decide which technologies and businesses thrive, Germany can unlock its full economic potential.
Okay, I'm starting to see the bigger picture here. Lindner's basically advocating for a leaner, more agile economy, driven by the private sector, rather than government intervention.
You got it. But he doesn't just stop at the theory. He lays out a very specific three-pronged action plan for how to make this vision a reality.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for our listeners, right? We're moving from the big ideas to concrete actions. Let's hear it. What's the first part of his plan?
The first area of focus is all about unleashing what he calls new dynamism. And he kicks things off with a pretty bold proposal, a complete freeze on any new regulations. For 3 years, he calls it a regulatory moratorium.
Wow, a full stop to any new red tape for businesses? That's a pretty radical move.
It is. He's basically hitting the pause button on new regulations to give businesses some breathing room. And it doesn't stop there. He also wants to ease what he sees as the burdens of the EU's Green Deal.
So is he saying he's against climate action? That doesn't sound very German.
No, he's not against climate action. But he thinks the current approach is too burdensome. It might actually be counterproductive. He wants to streamline things, reduce the paperwork, and give companies more flexibility in how they achieve environmental goals.
I can see how that might appeal to businesses. Less paperwork and more flexibility sounds good to most people, I think. What else is on his unleashing dynamism agenda?
This is the part that will probably make a lot of businesses happy. Tax cuts. Lindner wants to significantly lower taxes for businesses, starting with the solidarity surcharge.
Okay, hold on. For those of us who aren't fluent in German tax code, what exactly is the solidarity surcharge?
Good point. It's a surcharge that was introduced after German reunification to help finance the costs of integrating East Germany. It's added onto your income tax bill.
Ah, okay. So he wants to get rid of that extra tax burden on businesses. And what else?
He also wants to lower the corporate tax rate, arguing that Germany needs to stay competitive with other countries that have already lowered their rates.
So less regulation, lower taxes. It sounds like he's really trying to create a more attractive environment for businesses in Germany. Anything else in this first area?
Yes. He's also big on fostering innovation. He wants to see more venture capital flowing into startups and make Germany a magnet for cutting-edge research. He sees this as crucial for Germany's future economic success.
So it's not just about cutting taxes and red tape. It's about investing in the future and making Germany a leader in new technologies.
Exactly. And it's a pretty ambitious agenda. But remember, this is just the first part of his three-pronged plan.
Okay, well, I'm all ears. What's area number 2 all about?
Area 2 is all about ditching, what he calls the German special path on climate. Remember, he was critical of Germany's ambitious goal of climate neutrality by 2045.
Right, he thinks it's too much too fast. So what's his alternative?
He wants to align Germany's climate goals with the EU's target of climate neutrality by 2050. He believes that this would give Germany more time to achieve its goals in a way that's less disruptive to the economy.
So he's not denying climate change or saying Germany shouldn't do its part, but he wants to take a more pragmatic approach.
Exactly. He's all about finding a balance between protecting the environment and protecting the economy. And a big part of that is scrapping what he sees as unnecessary climate regulations and subsidies.
Like what? Give me an example.
Well, he's particularly critical of subsidies for renewable energy. Germany has invested heavily in solar and wind power, but Lindner argues that these subsidies are no longer needed and are actually distorting the market.
Wow, that's going to be controversial. A lot of people in Germany are really proud of the country's progress on renewable energy. I can see that sparking a lot of debate.
Oh, absolutely. But Lindner is clearly willing to shake things up. He wants to see a more level playing field for all energy sources. And he's even open to exploring things like carbon capture and storage. and increasing domestic natural gas production.
Okay, so it's a pretty significant shift away from the green pioneer image that Germany has cultivated.
It is, and it's sure to face pushback from environmental groups and others who believe that Germany needs to maintain its leadership role in climate action.
It's a tough issue for sure. It feels like there's no easy answer. Okay, so we've covered unleashing new dynamism and ditching the German special path on climate. What's the final piece of Lindner's action plan?
The third area of focus is mobilizing the labor market. Remember how we talked about Germany's problem with a low labor volume? Well, Lindner has some pretty specific ideas about how to address that.
Okay, let's hear it. What's his plan?
He wants to make some significant changes to the social benefit system. His goal is to incentivize work and simplify the system. Right now, he argues, it's possible for people to actually be worse off financially if they work more hours or take a higher-paying job because they lose some of their benefits.
Yeah, I've heard that's a problem in some social welfare systems. It can create a real disincentive to work. So how does Lindner propose to fix that?
He wants to reduce unemployment benefits and reform the pension system to encourage people to work longer. He's also talking about tightening eligibility criteria for various social programs.
It sounds like he's trying to reduce the size and scope of the welfare state. That's going to be a tough sell for some people, especially those who depend on those programs.
Oh, absolutely. It's one of the most controversial aspects of his plan. His critics argue that these changes would disproportionately hurt low-income households and could lead to increased poverty and inequality.
So there's a real concern that his focus on fiscal austerity could come at the expense of social welfare.
Exactly. But Lindner argues that these reforms are necessary to ensure the long-term sustainability of the system. He believes that Germany needs to adapt to the realities of an aging population and a changing global economy.
It sounds like he's trying to walk a tightrope, trying to balance economic competitiveness with social responsibility. But with all these proposed cuts, where's the money going to come from for his other priorities, like investing in innovation and research?
That's a great question, and it leads us to the most concrete part of his plan. His proposed budget for 2025.
Okay, so this is where the rubber meets the road. Let's get into the nitty-gritty details of his budget proposal. What's he planning to cut? What's he planning to invest in?
Well, his budget is basically the practical application of his Wirtschaftspapier vision. And as you might expect, it's pretty controversial.
I bet. So lay it on me. Where's the axe falling?
One of his primary targets is spending on climate policies, particularly those subsidies for renewable energy that we talked about. He also wants to reduce international climate finance.
So he's really serious about shifting away from Germany's traditional approach to climate change?
He is. He argues that these cuts are necessary to free up resources for other priorities, like boosting innovation and making the economy more competitive.
And what about those social benefit programs we were just discussing? Is he planning to make cuts there as well?
He is. He wants to reduce unemployment benefits, tighten eligibility criteria for various social programs, and reform the pension system to make it more sustainable.
I can already hear the protests. Those cuts are going to be very unpopular with certain segments of the population.
Oh, absolutely. These are some of the most contentious aspects of this plan. But Lindner is adamant that these reforms are necessary to ensure Germany's long-term economic health and to avoid burdening future generations with unsustainable levels of debt.
It sounds like he's willing to make some tough and unpopular choices to achieve his vision, but I'm still curious about those investments he keeps talking about. If he's cutting so much spending, where's the money going to come from to fund things like research and development, infrastructure upgrades, and all those other things he says Germany needs to stay competitive?
That's the key question, isn't it? How do you balance fiscal discipline with the need to invest in the future?
Exactly. It feels like he's trying to square a circle here.
Yes, and it's not going to be easy.
Yeah.
But Lindner believes it's essential for Germany's future success.
All right. So we've delved into his three-pronged action plan, explored his controversial budget proposal, and gotten a sense of the tough choices he's willing to make. But is he really going to be able to pull this off? Germany's a democracy, and it sounds like a lot of his ideas are going to face some pretty stiff resistance.
You're right. It's not going to be a cakewalk. He's going to need to build consensus, make compromises, and convince a lot of people that his vision is the right one for Germany.
It's a fascinating story, and one that we'll be following closely. It raises so many questions about the future of Germany, its role in Europe, and its place in the global economy. But I think we need to shift gears a little bit and look beyond the specifics of Lindner's plan.
Okay. I'm intrigued. What do you have in mind?
Well, I'm wondering about the bigger picture here. What are the potential consequences of Lindner's vision, both for Germany and for the rest of the world, if he actually manages to implement even a portion of this Wirtschaftspapier? How would it change things?
That's a really important question, and I think it's one that a lot of people are asking right now.
So let's dive into that. What are the potential ripple effects of this economic turnaround?
One of the most immediate impacts would likely be felt in the renewable energy sector. Germany has been a global leader in this field. But if Lindner gets his way and those subsidies disappear, it could have a chilling effect on investment and innovation.
So Germany could lose its edge in green technology. That would be a pretty big shift, wouldn't it?
It would. And it's something that a lot of people in Germany are worried about. They see the green economy as the future and worried that Lindner's policies could set the country back.
It's almost like he's betting on a different future, one where Germany competes on things like traditional manufacturing and high-tech industries, rather than green technology.
That's a good observation. And it raises the question of whether he's right. Is Germany better off sticking to its strengths or trying to become a leader in every sector?
It's a tough call. Okay, so what about Germany's relationships with other countries? How would those be affected by this Wirtschaftspapier?
Well, one area where we might see some tension is in Europe. Lindner has hinted at reducing financial assistance to other EU member states. And that's not going to go over well with everyone.
So a less generous Germany, perhaps, less willing to help out its neighbors.
Potentially, yes. Especially if he follows through on his plans to cut back on international climate finance. That could strain relationships with countries that are struggling to adapt to climate change.
It sounds like this economic turnaround could make Germany a bit more isolated on the world stage.
It's possible. And it would be a significant shift for a country that has traditionally been a strong advocate for international cooperation.
But couldn't there also be positive ripple effects? I mean, if Germany becomes more economically competitive, wouldn't that benefit the entire EU?
That's the argument that Lindner is making. He believes that a stronger German economy will ultimately lift all boats in Europe.
So it's a bit of a gamble, isn't it? He's betting that the benefits of a more dynamic German economy will outweigh the potential costs in terms of social cohesion and international relations.
Exactly. And it's a gamble that a lot of people are watching very closely. The stakes are high, not just for Germany, but for the entire global economy.
It's been a fascinating deep dive into the heart of the German economic debate. We've unpacked Lindner's vision, explored the potential consequences, and tried to understand what it all means for the future.
And as we've seen, there are no easy answers here. It's a complex issue with valid arguments on both sides.
Exactly. But I think that's what makes it so interesting. It's a reminder that economic policy is not just about numbers and spreadsheets. It's about values, choices, and the kind of society we want to live in.
It's about the future we want to create.
And with that thought-provoking note, we'll wrap up our deep dive into Christian Lindner's Wirtschaftspapier. We hope you found it informative, insightful, and maybe even a little bit unsettling.
Because sometimes the best deep dives are the ones that leave you with more questions than answers.
So keep those questions in mind as you continue to explore this issue. Challenge assumptions, seek out diverse perspectives, and engage in constructive dialogue about the best path forward for Germany and for the world.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring.